Today is going to be about sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. We know the old phrase of sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And there's actually a capacity in every failure and every problem that you actually can win because the win is in the learn. So that's what today is going to be about. And a little bit ahead, probably after I go through the don'ts of what it is to when you have a problem or a failure, I'm actually going to share something that's kind of hot off the press for me in how I learned how to win in a situation. And I actually have a really great result that came about from what I was seeing as a big loss in some things that are very important to me that I value. So, as you can see, really my passion is life and leadership coaching. However, I do understand that I am gifted when it comes to helping teams and people learn how to communicate better and just have a great way forward as a team. So today, we're going to grasp what not to do and what to do when you're facing problems and failures. We're going to identify the right way to think, and we're going to partner in adding value to one another.
I have 3.
Problems and failures. They exist for everybody. For some reason, I have met a lot of professionals, and when it comes to problems and especially failures, there is this tendency to want to hide it, to not want to talk about it and keep it to ourselves as if that's the best way to handle them. And as we all know, that's not the case. And yet we find that people have a very hard time being vulnerable and transparent. And as we go through this, you're going to see that I'm really going to hit that hard on how that's really a don't in having problems and failures. In actuality, we could actually see problems as failures as opportunities. I was just sharing with a friend of mine who works at Wayne State in the social department. And I was talking to her and I just said, every time a situation happens, especially a problem or something that I personally perceive as a failure, I've learned to take it as an opportunity to learn about myself. I've learned that it's in the failure and in the problems, I learn more about myself than in my wins. So they really are opportunities for learning. So we're going to learn that we're going to be able to apply that it is possible to win every single time. It's when you learn in the midst of a perceived loss that you win every single time. So we're going to jump right in on the don't. You don't want to underestimate the problem or failure. And before I go on, please feel free if you want to take screenshots of this. Kristen will be getting this as well. So if you're wanting the slideshow, just reach out to her. She'll be getting this after we're done. But I am totally okay with you also taking screenshots because sometimes when it's hot off the press, I want the screenshot so I can write the notes. You want to take each problem and failure seriously. I learned years ago that in a problem or a failure, if I don't go ahead and really look at it for what it is, then I may be missing out on a nugget that I will take on and use in future situations. So we don't want to overlook them and we don't want to act as though they don't exist. We want to take them for what they are and take them seriously. Our reaction to the situation will determine the outcome. The size of the person is more important than the size of the problem. What do I mean by that? It's in the problems and the failures that you actually find out who you can become or who you were created to become. Because if you'll go ahead and look at that problem and that failure, you'll realize that there's more in you to overcome than if you just act like it's not there. And when you realize that there is a capacity within you, I truly believe that when you're in a situation If you're in the situation, you have the capacity to handle the situation. Doesn't matter if you feel like it, and it doesn't matter if you believe it. And if you just take one step at a time and just really evaluate that, you'll realize you're much bigger than the situation is yourself. Your perspective on the situation is so important. Perspective is everything. And if there's any questions along the way, please let Denise or Kristen know, and I'll be happy to pause. I love the interaction, so don't be afraid to step out. The next thing we don't want to do is overestimate the problem or failure. Don't exaggerate the impact of the situation. My story I'm going to share with you is I'm going to really be helping you to see how I personally, because I am a deep thinker and I really internalize some things, I can overly think a thing to the point where it's exaggerated and it's really not even happening. Sometimes we can experience a situation 3 or more times. It doesn't make sense, right? The first time you experience it, it's in the worrying about the situation. The second time is when the situation actually happens. The third time is when it is experienced again as it is relived. What do I mean by that? When you experience it again, it's really in the conversations that you have after it's happened, right? It's happened, it's over, and all of a sudden you are talking to a coworker or you're talking to a family member, and you literally are going through from the beginning to the end that situation. And what you don't realize you're doing is you're rehearsing the hurt or the issue or the failure or the problem, and it really should have only happened one time. Usually the situation is not as big of a situation as we anticipate. And by tackling it, we shrink it down in size. A lot of times when we overthink a situation, instead of just going ahead and looking at it for what it is and seeing that there more than likely are some steps to take, we will run the risk of this thing just getting so blown out of proportion, when in actuality, if we'll just go ahead and just say, okay, here's the situation, here's what I see currently, and just take that step with that one thing that you see. Usually the next step is revealing itself as you take that one step. And I like to use the phrase, do it freaking out afraid. Doesn't matter if you're afraid, doesn't matter if you believe you have the capacity to do it anyway. And you'll usually find that that next step shows up to tell you what to do next. You don't want to wait for the problem or failure to solve itself. Do all that you can to fix the situation. It's only then that patience is a virtue. Patience is not a virtue if you are waiting and hoping that the situation will go away or resolve itself. You know what's interesting about patience? You don't learn patience unless you have a failure or an issue or a problem. Patience just doesn't come automatic. It comes through having to go through something. I wish it came otherwise, but it doesn't. So in order to really hone in on being skillful and being patient, you actually need to have a situation to force it. Situations demand that we pay them attention. It's kind of like the elephant in the room thing, right? The elephant's there. To walk around it doesn't stop it from existing. So you might as well just space it, look at it, and say, how can I get this thing out of the room? Left alone, they almost always get worse. You don't want to make the problem or failure worse. How do we do that? How you respond matters most. Remaining positive and taking action to resolve the situation. That, when I get ready to share with you the situation that happened for me, this was the, I would say, the learning curve that I'm still apprehending and probably will to the day I die, on being positive first versus immediately looking to the negative of what can happen, hasn't even happened yet. And yet I can tend to look at that versus what's the positive that can come out of this. So here's how some ways that we can actually make a situation worse. You can lose your perspective. You can give up important priorities and values. You can lose a sense of humor. We can feel sorry for ourselves, and we can blame others for our situation. I unfortunately can say that I have been guilty of all five. And I'm sure there's so many more, right? But these are just some that are pretty common that we can see happens when we are facing a situation. So before we go into, I'm going to backtrack on this. So I'll share the scenario for me that really turned out really great. So as a coach, it's always, and I'm sure this is in every field, but for me, since coaching is my passion, as a coach, we are taught that in order for you to be a great coach, you need to actively engage a coach yourself and have yourself under the tutelage of another coach. So I do have a business coach. In January this year, she had asked for those of us that are her clients if we were interested to participate with her in an online launch of a program that she offers. And so I thought about it and I thought, well, we'll see. I think maybe I could learn some things from it. So I said yes. And in the midst of saying the yes, she was clear that this was her first time doing it in this way, especially in using her clients. And so everything was going to be brand new. I heard that, but I didn't hear that. So I said yes. It was a week-long commitment. And that's what we were told, yet it didn't turn out that way. So the number one thing for me that was getting triggered was my value for my personal time. And I can be very protective of my personal time because I've had a lot of things as far as ministry and business and family that if I'm not careful to make sure that I set the boundary, others will override my boundary. So when I saw that, I started kind of going sideways in my head. And we got into the program. We were doing a lot of things. With it being an online situation, what I didn't realize was it was 24/7 because we were dealing with people all over the world. So I was an advisor for women all over the world, Philippines, Jamaica, Nigeria. They're all contacting me, meaning my phone is blowing up like crazy in Messenger because they're messaging me to want to know more about this program. So now you really are in a place where not only have you crossed my boundaries on my time as far as a day shift, I wanted business hours with this and it wasn't, but now you're actually communicating with me in time, even in the day isn't mine. So I continued, and I would say about the third day in, my husband asked me how it was going. And I said, I'm just going to be honest. I'm really having an attitude problem. I'm ticked off because she's got too much of my time. It's too much of a responsibility. And this is what I signed up for. And it's so much of a responsibility that I can't even pay attention to my own business. Totally was not happy. And so from there, I realized I needed to step back and I needed to take in, okay, what's going to be the benefit of this situation that I'm in? Because I'm in it now. Once I commit, I'm not going to uncommit. I'm in it to the end, but my attitude meant everything. So I went ahead and reevaluated it. My husband gave me some input and just said, hey, here's some things that are great about this. And I said, I know that, but because of all these other things, I can't see that. And so then I had to step back even further and just say to myself, okay, what's at the core here? And the core was I felt like my values and my priorities were not being considered. The problem with that is up front, she let me know there's going to be things that are going to happen that as we learn through this first round, will rectify. So I realized I had to step back, forgive her, and just say, this is going to be a great learning experience for me, if nothing else. Now, prior to that, because there was some incentive as far as commissions and all of that, I was not caring about that. I was that upset. So while doing it and deciding to make an attitude adjustment and a thinking adjustment, changing the way I thought about the whole thing, I began to enjoy it, even though it was totally bypassing all my priorities, totally bypassing all my values. And the more I enjoyed it, I didn't care about the time. I actually was enjoying the engagement. I was actually enjoying that I was meeting women from all over the world. All those things I didn't even recognize while I was ticked off and upset. So from there, we got to the end of the program, and my coach sent out an email to all of us that were part of it. My attitude shift meant everything. I was the highest sales advisor. And after that, she just reached out to me within the last few weeks and asked if I would be willing to be one of her coaches on her team of she has over 100 clients. And so she's asking me to come on board with her. And so I've just signed a $40K contract with her as a coach. My attitude meant everything. So let's go to some do's. Let's anticipate the problem and failure.
Cortney, before you go forward,
Yeah.
with you signing the contract with her, did you at that point set boundaries in terms of scheduling, or at this point, are you now able to do that on your own?
Thank you so much for asking that question. So what she did at the very end was she had asked all of us to fill out end of program questionnaire. And there were several of us coaches that had the same thing. But one thing I've learned about when I'm having an issue, and I don't mean this to sound crass, but I tend to be the one to just step out and just say what I think everybody else wants to say, but they don't say. And so I just let the other advisors know, hey, at the end of this, what will benefit her best is being honest, being transparent, giving her the full feedback. And I can be honest with you, I believe that's why she approached me in the after, approached me to come on board with her, because she's actually doing the launch this week right now. And to answer your question, what she's done is she's put it within business hours. And she's let every single person know right now that is watching her doing this launch that all of the advisors are not available but through a certain time frame. So being willing to have the tough conversation or to give, as my husband would like to say, positive feedback. It's feedback that may not feel positive, but it is positive if you take it and you move forward with it, to know that for the benefit of everybody, not just yourself as the leader, but for the benefit of everybody, that feedback could make it so that the ones who really don't want to speak up, their voice is heard through somebody else that chose to speak up, such as myself. And then therefore, she realized when I gave her all my feedback, why was I the top advisor as far as on the back end? Because I gave that feedback to let her know if I'm doing that and it's 24/7, the probability of all your other advisors doing the same thing is pretty good.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. Thank you for asking. So we want to anticipate the problem or failure. You want to be aware of what could happen. There's a fine line, right? Between worrying and just being aware. And if I'd have done that in that situation, if I'd have just stayed in that place of I'm aware of what this can do versus worrying, I would have had a much better experience earlier than what I did. This doesn't mean that worrying all the time about everything that could go wrong. Don't give it all of your attention. Find the balance between thinking ahead and becoming a worrywart. Now, for those of you who are familiar with DISC, I would say that those who are C, compliance, this could be a challenge, as well as S's, because there is an internal way of thinking. And anyone that's an introvert, if you're an internal thinker, this more than likely is your challenge. If you're an extrovert, or you're a D personality or an I personality, you find that the best way that you work these things out, or you think these things out, is that you are in front of somebody else having a conversation, and while you're talking, you're hearing your solution. Therefore, you don't worry about it. You find your answers and you move. The C's and the S's, sometimes, you know, there's the paralysis, the analysis paralysis that can happen. You want to communicate the problem or failure. This is, I was just talking with a client yesterday, and she works for the government. She's been working for the government for over 30 years. And I found it so interesting that her number one challenge being a career professional is being vulnerable to communicate. Communicate about what's going wrong. If there is a problem with one person specifically, try talking with them about the situation. Find someone who, oh, before I go to this one, when you realize that it's a person and you talk with them about it, why would you want to do that? Because you want to gain their perspective. You might find out that there really isn't an issue, it's just a miscommunication. But you'll never know that if you don't go ahead and have that conversation. And okay, so in saying that, confrontation can seem like it's a cuss word. I don't know of anybody that really likes it. And yet those who choose to do it usually find out that when they went ahead and did the confrontation, and really I would just say, take that word confrontation out of your vocabulary and just say it's a conversation. It's a candid conversation about a situation that in actuality, both people, or whoever is in that situation, they want a resolution, no matter how uncomfortable it is, because they want to move forward and they want to have some form of a very cordial relationship, even if it doesn't go into a deep relationship. So to not communicate with that person or the group and just let it go on, you're not only doing yourself a disadvantage, you're also doing the person or the team a disadvantage by not communicating. You want to find someone who cares about you and tell them what's going on. Now this one is there's a fine line between complaining and really sharing the situation. So here's some good advice. Remember, your goal in sharing is to grow and change, not complain. You want to ask for their feedback and allow their perspective to help you view the problem differently. You want to evaluate the problem or failure. You're going to evaluate by asking, how important is the issue at hand? Does it really matter? Now, for me, with that situation that I just shared with you all, Was it really important? Did it really matter that my schedule was totally disregarded? No, because I really had already kind of set everything aside, knowing that this would probably need my focus. I just didn't know how much. You have to determine the size and weight of each situation individually. That's what I had to do in that situation, was really determine how big of a deal is it for 1 week that my life as I planned it, because I'm a planner, you mess with my plan, you mess with my structure, I'm ready to fight. So, but would it have been okay for me to just put that aside for that week? Yes, it wasn't that big of a deal. How, so move past it. It's going to work for my benefit. And obviously it did. You want to find out who's involved. Knowing who's involved allows you to target the solution toward the specific person and their personality. Now, going into DISC a little bit, wasn't planning on doing this, but I want to share with you how important this is. When I realized it's my business coach, when that situation was over and done with, she's still my business coach. If I didn't go ahead and get the right perspective with that, it would have affected my relationship with her. But I also knew something else about her, because she gave me the opportunity to do a DISC assessment with her. I wound up knowing more about her than anyone else on our team, anyone else in her, actually out of her clients. So I knew she's a DC. She's a C. I am a C, high C. So I knew she would appreciate the information. So with the information that I gave her in the assessment, I was able to target the solution, so to speak, through the back door, right? Because I still had those issues, even though I got over them. If I ever became an advisor again, there's no way I would have done it if things stayed the way that they were the first time and she didn't change them. So knowing that she is a person that loves details, knowing that she is a person that is willing to grow and hear feedback, it was everything to target the solution, and she actually created a solution. So it's important to really take into consideration who's involved in your problem and your failure. You want to appreciate the problem or failure. That seems like such an oxymoron, right? And yet it's so vital. It's very vital. Problems and failures bring opportunities. That problem, because it really wasn't a failure for me. It would have became a failure for me because, to be honest with you, in that situation, it would have became a failure because I tend to be the kind of person that when I'm in a situation, whatever I'm thinking and how I'm feeling is going to show up in how I perform. If I'd have stayed that way, there's no way I would have gotten those women to buy into the program. And one thing about me is when it comes to doing something like that, I'm not going to be an advisor or be a salesperson for something I don't believe in. If I'm in it, it's because I believe in it and I know the benefits for it. Well, I knew all of that. So in the midst of that, as I changed the way I thought and realized, man, this is such an opportunity. I did not realize that my coaching skills were as good as they were. And I would never have known that if I didn't go ahead and surrender to the situation and got out of stinking thinking. I would not have realized that because I believe in something, I don't view it as sales. I view it as you are missing out if you don't take advantage of this. So there's so much that as I change the way I think, and I also learned I really need to get better at having positive thinking. None of that would have been exposed to me if I'd have not allowed the situation to take its place and appreciate it. And then on top of it, I got a bonus out of that, and now I have this contract. So problems and failures actually can be your best friends. So with the right attitude, each situation can help you to work harder to solve it, which if you know me, The moment I realize that my whole structure is out of whack, it takes a lot of work for me to be okay with that. So I did work harder. You learn and you grow from it. I just shared with you how I grew, and there's still so much more that I didn't even share with you that I grew. You realize that the problem or failure always brings opportunities, and opportunities often bring problems and failures. The two go hand in hand. So how can we apply what we know? I'd love to hear, how could knowing this information be valuable to how you respond to problems and failures? I'm opening it up to let's have conversation. Tell me some thoughts, some questions. Let's dialogue.
One thing I've appreciated in myself over time is pretty much have removed the word problem from my vocabulary and replaced it with challenge. People tend to not overcome problems. They make your eyes spin, your head, or your eyes spin, your ears ring, your knees buckle.
Yes.
But we do overcome challenges by either trying harder, trying a different way, approaching it on a different day. But we as people tend to overcome challenges, but problems become overwhelming.
That's so good, Keith. Thank you for that. Love it. So
Courtney, can you repeat the question?
yeah. How could what we've learned help you to respond to problems and failures?
I'd love for you to explain more on confrontation and like healthy confrontation.
Of course you would.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go for
Yes,
it.
please.
Yeah, so before you explain that, so one of the things that I've learned, and even it's just helping me to just listening to your presentation, to keep this in mind, that there's no situation that can come up or problem or issue that can come up that I don't have the solution either within me or know someone that has the solution. So I'm always looking at a situation as an opportunity for growth within myself. Not just that I have the answer for everything, it's just that I know someone that doesn't know what I know, and I can always reach out and connect and partner with someone else that can help me in a situation, and then I grow from that. That's the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing. It's similar to what Keith was saying. It's changing the way you view problems or challenges. It's really changing it to, it's really an opportunity. It's an opportunity for you to grow. It's an opportunity for you to realize there's such capacity within yourself that truthfully, I'm just going to say this for me, and I know it applies to all of you as well. And yet, you know, we oftentimes, if we're honest with ourselves, we don't take advantage of it. But there's so much more capacity in you that unfortunately, it usually arises through challenges or just flat out failures. Because in that moment, you can choose. And that's the thing. That's almost like sandpaper. It is a choice at the end of the day. Bottom line, you can choose to go forward and just say, you know what, this is a challenge, or you can choose not to. Either way, that choice has a consequence. For sure.
No, what I love about this smartphone is I have hundreds of individuals in my network, and I typically have to put an issue next to their name. It's kind of funny, but if something came up and I didn't know, I would just type that in my phone and I'd come up with the person I can contact and say, hey, I need some help.
That's good.
Because I mean, a lot of my business is I work for a utility. Everything's an emergency. So I don't have like hours to try to figure something out.
Mhm.
I just go to my network if I don't have the answer. But then I typically grow from it, right?
Yeah, that's good. And that's a great segue into what Dawn asked me to go deeper into, and that's confrontation, right? I think first and foremost, if we can really look at it as it truly is a conversation. It's a conversation that is with the intention of gaining insight, perspective, and resolution. And when you really think about it, that conversation is really having the other person's best interest in mind and your best interest in mind. Think of it from this standpoint. If it's a conversation that really needs to be happening, and 9 times out of 10, it is, who's really at a disadvantage in not having that conversation? Is it the other person or is it you? It's you. Because there's some things about you that you need to know that maybe you're doing, that you are doing unintentionally, that you're saying unintentionally and affecting others. And yet, if you don't go ahead and have that conversation, and then here's the thing, that person on the other side of that conversation, they too are in the same position as you. They need to have the insight, they need to have the perspective, they need that way forward and how to resolve the situation. So you really, if you can think of it from a different perspective of realizing that you're going to make yourself and that other person better on the other side of it, even if it means that there's no resolution between the two, you still gain respect because you chose to have that conversation. It's vital. The thing that you have to understand when you're doing the conversation is most people realize the tone in which you're having that conversation. That's a tough one. And I would say, I've said this to many young women that I mentor because a lot of, especially our millennials, I love y'all. But confrontation doesn't come natural. Having the tough conversation doesn't come natural. And so what I've told them is, at this point, it doesn't matter if you do it right, just do it. You can clean it up later. What do I mean by that? Go to the person, say what's on your mind, and just know that more than likely, because you've never done it, is going to be messy. And that's okay. Because once it comes out and you say it and you've really got out of your heart what you really wanted to say, you can now turn around and say, now look, I meant what I said, but how I said it wasn't how I really wanted it to come out. I was really nervous and I just really want to be able to get this out and get this on the table because I want us to move forward. That's what's so important about the conversation. It's not that you do it perfect. It's not that you say the right things completely, and you get better as you continue to do it. Does that help, Dawn?
Yeah, yeah. And then what about for someone that does not like to go and confront at all and will talk behind someone's back instead? How do you move from that being your comfortable mode? Like you hate it so much that you won't approach a person. What would you say to that person? How do you make that first step?
I would suggest that you do it in writing. And I think I'm going to step out on a limb here and believe that Carl's going to be okay with me saying this. For me, early on in our marriage, there were some issues that we were having. And I really, as much as I know I'm a great communicator, at that point, because I was so afraid of the backlash of bringing up a topic, I learned that I do need to do this. And, even with what you said, Don, as far as talking behind their back, that has different words to it, right? Oh, I'm just getting this
Right.
so-and-so's feedback. I'm just getting perspective. And that's where that fine line is, because are you really, or are you really wanting someone to side with you and say that you're thinking and feeling the right way? Well, then that's really not a benefit to you. So I would go and talk to other people and I would get the pat on the back and oh, you should feel that way, but it really wasn't changing my situation. So at that point, I learned I've got to figure out a way to communicate. So I started writing it on paper, and I would leave
Okay.
it. I would leave it on his desk or his nightstand. And truthfully, I did that in work situations as well. So that's why I'm bringing that in, because in some of those things where, and it could be that you may feel like that person isn't even going to hear what you have to say. Well, they will read what you write. And I think the thing to realize with that is at the end of the day, when the confrontation doesn't happen that needs to happen, whatever your reason is that you're not doing it, realize the one that's getting hurt the most is the one who's not having the conversation that they know they need to have, not the other person.
Well, typically, if the note didn't work, we just bring in a mediator.
I don't think I gave you permission to chime in on that one.
Arbitrator, as the case may be,
What'd you say, Keith?
or arbitrator, as the case may be.
Right.
Oh, no, not that.
Well, we're 21 years in, so I think we did really good so far. We're doing good.
Well, you think, but from a business perspective, we all have to do that at times, right? I mean, we know everyone's not comfortable with confrontation, so we should identify that, because that person sometimes just needs help. They may need a mediator. They may need someone that'll not be an advocate necessarily, but someone that can sit between the two. And as long as there's a common goal, you're trying to reach the same thing, right? A solution. Then typically those go pretty well if you can have someone that could sit in that's skillful at listening and giving, and just giving some good feedback.
Well, Dawn, can I use you as an example for a second?
Yeah.
Okay. So with Dawn, Dawn had shared earlier that I am helping her with her staff. That is also a place of a coach. It's also a place of a business consultant when you're talking about your business. When you, as the leader of the organization, realize that you do have one or more employees where you're realizing that there is a breakdown in communication and it's changing your environment and your atmosphere, it is awesome to bring in a person who is unbiased. And you want to make sure they're unbiased. And that way, that person can hear both sides. And oftentimes what you'll find is that you're not hearing the other person. And here comes this unbiased person that comes in, sits in the room, and just reflects back what's been said. And there's such a great awareness, and there's a great capacity that it rectifies and creates such a great environment and relationship between each of you. So, if it's not a letter, and it just depends on the relationship and how long it's been, but, and okay, how about the other side of that? How about being the one that knows that this is happening behind your back? If you are aware of that, or it's come to your awareness and you're not quite sure, then I would say to you, be the one to have the conversation, because you will help them to realize that it's backfiring on them.
So how do you do that? Like, what if you have a hunch that someone is talking behind your back? How do you do that?
I would say, really going to that person and just saying, I'm really, I'm wondering, that there just seems to be some conversation that I'm thinking is happening, but I'm not sure. Would you happen to know anything about that? Because I really would love to fix whatever the problem is.
Okay.
And sometimes the approach could also be, hey, I really could use your help with something. Everybody wants to help. Everybody wants to help. Even the meanest person and the most non-communicative person is looking to add value to someone. So approaching them from that standpoint of, I could really use your help, and then saying, it just seems to me that there's some conversation going on that I really would love to be a part of because I want to bring resolution, and yet I'm not sure how to do that. And more than likely, the things that you've been told or the things that you have a hunch on are actually going to come out of their mouth because you're coming through a back door. They're totally disarmed.
Got it.
Any other questions, comments, feedback?
I feel like there's probably some things in there to talk about too. Like when you have a dysfunctional client, I feel like there's probably some opportunities. But I don't know if anyone has like an example of maybe a client coming out at them harsh, or maybe a client making a mistake, or you making a mistake and like finding resolution through that. Is there anyone that wants to share or has a question surrounding that? I feel like that's an issue that we're faced with so much.
Mm-hmm. When you have a disgruntled, or it appears that they're disgruntled, but they're not talking about it, I've learned, and I think I've even done this with you recently, Dawn, I've learned to ask the question of, coming from the standpoint of, I want to make sure that I'm serving you in the way that you need to be served. So is there anything, any feedback that you could give me to make sure that I'm serving you well? Again, you're disarming them. You're coming from a perspective that really they are hearing it as, oh my goodness, she wants my help, or he wants my help. So when you come from that, kind of that humbled place, right? Where you are letting them know I may not be getting it right, but help me get it right. How can I help you? How can I serve you? What is it that you need from me so that we can get the benefit? You and I, because this really isn't about me, it's about you. How can we get the best benefit out of this relationship? Because we're in it. So what do I need to do? And that will mean hearing oftentimes some things we don't want to hear. But again, it's an opportunity for growth because there are different people, different personalities, different perspectives, and you don't know, that person could be going through something personally that you have no idea about, and you just happen to be the one that's in the middle of the road that gets smacked upside the head with their attitude.
So can I ask, I guess I'd ask Dawn and maybe even your colleagues here a question. In the utility space, there's always been this this saying that the customer is always right. That's kind of broad. I mean, we can really kind of go on a rabbit trail on that whole statement. But what does that mean to you guys? Is that a true statement? Like, is the customer always right?
No,
Hey, Scott.
they might have part of it right.
Say more, Scott. What does that mean?
I'm trying to think about how I can say more. They may have information that convinces them that what they're saying is true, but given all the information, maybe it's not true. So maybe our job is to help them understand all the perspective and all the different angles. Yes, I understand what you're saying. Let me share something that might make a difference on how you view that situation.
That's awesome. That's great. Very good.
I think it might be a little different, maybe being self-employed, because you don't have the bureaucracy of the leveling, and which can, sometimes the level could be good, right? Because it helps keep you probably in check a little bit more. Probably a little easier to get out of check, or to maybe be, I don't know, disrespectful is the right word, but disrespectful to a client or lash back because it's emotional and it's more,
Mm.
they're maybe attacking your integrity, and it's less about the business, right? And
Mhm.
in like utility space or a corporation space, you can just deflect back to the company.
Mhm.
But when it's an attack directly on you, let's say you're a real estate agent or an insurance professional or a clothier, and they're directly attacking your business and you and your integrity, I think it becomes all the more difficult to keep the client's always right and keep it extremely professional, and all the more reasons that we need to make corrective action when we do mess up.
Mm-hmm. And something you said is really key, Dawn. I think you said it a few times just in that little bit of a time that you spoke, is perspective. Are they attacking your integrity? Are they attacking you? Or is it the actions that's being made? That oftentimes, I'm just reminded of a situation where I was talking with an employee, and as I was talking with them, they were sharing with me how they were just feeling a certain way about something that they had done. And I listened to them and I said, so you're telling me that you believe that this is how your boss thinks, and yet have you been told that? And they said, well, no. And I said, so where is that coming from? Is that your own perspective that you are putting in the situation? Or is it they actually have said that to you? And I would say to that, don't believe a story that you haven't been told. If it hasn't been said directly in that way, it's not necessarily an attack on you as the person versus the transaction itself. And that's hard to differentiate. And yet, if you can differentiate it, it makes it so much easier to eat that humble pie and say, it seems to me that I am not serving you well. Can you help me to know what that looks like to you? Because it's not you as the person, it's what's happening in between you and the other person. And even they sometimes don't even realize it's not really you, it's what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like when I'm talking with clients that are super like honorary, sometimes I feel like I get like not shorter, like rude, but I just like don't say as much and let them talk at me. And then like just handle the situation that is happening. I don't think disrespectfully or anything, just like handle it, and then like get them their resolution that they're personally looking for. Is that a wrong way to handle it?
So I'm gonna ask you, Marissa, can I probe? But you already know I'm gonna probe, right? When that person is ornery or being just not nice, are you seeing that as personal towards you?
Not at all.
Okay. So when you're in that state of basically changing the way that you're responding, is it in a way that you're just more kind of quiet and just listening, or has your tone changed? What are the things that are happening in that moment?
I mean, it could kind of be either of those. Like my tone might be shorter, maybe sharper, but like sometimes it's just listening, sometimes it's sharper. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But Dawn, the other day we had to deal with someone that was very difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciated her telling me about it because of her response, and I never thought of doing it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And like the client was telling her what she does and like what her job is, and she was like, you're right, you're completely right, and just like kind of like give him compliments enough to be able to get off the phone and like have him be appeased.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was very interesting way to handle someone who's honorary.
Mm-hmm. Because usually I've learned this in so many scenarios and settings. I've learned that if we make it about them, always about them, then even in the most stubborn-willed person, there is a capacity to melt their heart, so to speak, by just there's a deeper listening that has to happen of what is their need? What is their need that they need to be met? And as you listen to it, you actually like, and Dawn is very good at this, by the way. In listening to the need, you immediately disarm them so that they can go ahead and finish receiving the service that you're offering them. Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate that. Anyone else?
Courtney?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jim Lorch with Coldwell Banker here. So I had a client that got bent out of shape over some things that dealt with, I'm a real estate agent, so the other agent did some things on the other side that frustrated things. And through it all, he became very frustrated. But as things progressed, he did not, his perspective and understanding of like some expectations he had of me were not even realistic.
Mm.
Because it was going to push me into bounds. Like I'm not an attorney,
Mm.
and when we're not supposed to do certain things or even get my broker involved in certain things. But I felt like he wanted to talk to me and not allow me to give explanation. And we've closed the deal, but I feel like there's still things unresolved there, and I just struggle with going back to him and trying to get perspective, because he's so I just, it's hard to know how to go back and, just make sure that I did the best that I could.
Mm.
Does that make sense? Like, I don't know, like going back and, trying to bring that perspective and that understanding, because it's important to me that my clients know I tried to give them the absolute best service I could.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Things I shouldn't be doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you. Thank you for being willing to share the scenario in the room here. And then I would say, have you gone to the place of asking for feedback yet since the transaction has closed?
Feedback on that or just overall?
Overall, because if you do it as overall, then it doesn't make it so that he can quickly get on the defensive, right? Because if you approach it in that regard, just that particular part of the situation, you run the risk of him getting offended because he already knows it's a bit of an issue.
Yes.
And yet, if you go to him and just say, hey, I want to make sure that I served you well, and I would love to get your feedback on how you felt our experience was. And when you do that, it sounds like you can tell he's going to be real open to let you know what that is. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and we've kind of moved beyond it. But at the same time, I hear what you're saying, just to be able to circle back around.
Yeah, because what you're going to, in fact, you can spin it by just saying, for me, as I move forward with my other clients, I would love your feedback as I move forward. So that way it totally makes it to where you're letting him know he's helping you, right? And as he gives you the feedback, you ask permission. That's huge with people that have that kind of a forceful way of handling things, and they want you to do something and have an expectation that hasn't even been verbalized to find out if we can meet. You can say, may I have permission to give you some insight in regards to that? And then more than likely he's going to say yes, because he's not expecting you to ask permission to speak into that situation. And in that moment, you're able to give him that information, but it sounds like it would be wise to make sure that it's concise and not very long in detail in how you say it. And then, and then say, does that help you to understand? And then he says yes. Okay, great. Is there anything else you need to share with me? Because I'm really appreciating how this is really going to add value to how I serve my other clients. So you're totally making him aware of two things, right? You're making him aware that you had expectations that you have that are unrealistic, and yet I value your input and it's going to make me better.
Great. Those are good thoughts. Thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I found that to be the case for me when I give that option to a client that's maybe pushy or bold or disgruntled, and I ask for their feedback to get better. That does disarm them quite a bit, and then that type of personality usually is wanting to give you feedback, and they kind of want you to take their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And they want you to listen to them, so it disarms them, very much disarms them, and it actually can turn around something that in their mind is bad, or in their mind they're unhappy with, and it can turn it all around where they're, oh, Dawn, you're okay, we're good.
And they can be they turn out to be, because they realize that you value them. Because that's the thing, at the end of the day, we all want to know we're valued, right? And because they realize that they're valued, they become your best referral.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that you said their permission for, can I give you some perspective after you listen to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the people that are most difficult that I've had to deal with, the most important thing to them is that they're heard. They want to know that they've been heard. Once they've been heard, and then and that will mean saying back to them exactly what they said so that they actually know you heard them. And then in that moment, being able to just say, may I speak into that? May I have permission to say something into that? Man, and for them, when the whole experience, because I just had this recently, and it was a really heated conversation. I like to call it intense fellowship, because we're fellowshipping, but it's really intense, and it's actually called an argument, but I don't want to use that word. So in that particular situation, when I had that happen, that person looked at me and said, and I said to them, I said, so here's what you're saying, and I'll be honest with you. I do not agree with what you're saying. However, I respect that this is how you think and how you feel. So but here's what I heard. And is that what you meant? And they said yes. And then I said, is there anything else you wanted to add to that? They said no. And I said, I respect that. Is there anything else we need to talk about? It blew them away. They just said, why don't people usually have conversations like this, where we both can hear each other even if we don't agree? I said, I don't know. I just desire to understand you and to be understood. And that was my goal. And it sounds like we achieved it, and we moved on.
Nice.
As long as you don't make it confrontational, it's always a benefit to find out why you lost something to somebody else. If the response is typically, well, the price was lower, that just means to me I missed something, because people don't buy only on price. Basically, if every car was $1, would you drive what you're driving now? So there is a perceived value that I obviously didn't communicate well, because you don't typically lose price as an issue unless you're just comparing a widget to a widget, because then you can always find a better price. But if there's quality and service behind it, that's a big issue. I mean, anybody can sell hardware, but it's what you do afterwards that makes a difference. If I lose it because of price, I know better, because I've been doing this 41 years, that I didn't lose it because of price. If it only came down as a price issue, then I missed something else. I missed a clue or something along the conversation.
That's good. That's really good. Thank you, Keith.
I find the topic insightful. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Cross out, learn. when I first started this business, it was a lot of rejection.
Mhm.
And I likened it to relationships, just to dealing with people.
Yeah.
A lot of people want you to compare yourself to the next realtor, to do some dishonest deeds.
Mm.
But I've learned you
Mm.
can't sacrifice your moral character, your integrity.
Mhm.
And I've also learned that if you keep pushing forward, as I've been hearing, just make sure that you're doing the best that you can do,
Yep.
and things will turn around. And instead of quitting, just learn. Learn from losing, because it's not really a loss. It's a
Mhm.
gain.
Absolutely.
It's actually a gain.
Absolutely. That's so good, Tasha, because the one thing you don't ever want to do in any transaction, any relationship, or any situation is lose you, your priorities, your values. Don't ever lose those for any transaction. And I've learned, and through the mentors that I have, I am a John Maxwell team member. For those of you that know who John Maxwell is, if you don't, he's the #1 leadership guru in the world. But one thing that even they teach us is every client is not for you, and you're not for every client. It's not just because that person is at the table doesn't mean you take it on, because it could be the worst thing ever. And will it be worth it? No. If you lose you, you lose your values, and you lose your priorities, and you lose your character and your integrity, that's a major loss that you could never get back.
Mhm.
So I love that.
Sometimes you have to know when to fire a client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Great point.
I'd like to say I've been in business since for myself, self-employed since '92, and just got into real estate about 4 years ago. But I've always been in sales, had sales companies. One of the main reasons I've done this and continue to do it, because it, gives me the time and everything I want to do to achieve
Mhm.
what I want.
Mhm.
But I get to decide who I want to work with.
Yes.
If I didn't like them, I just never called them back.
Yes.
And when they kept hounding me, yeah, maybe I would, but if you don't call somebody back, they're most likely going to go find somebody else.
So Keith, if I fire a client, I got to turn their gas off.
Oh, that was David.
I think Keith mentioned firing a client, right?
No, that was David that mentioned.
Well, yeah, all of us,
That
yeah.
was Keith,
Oh,
Yeah,
both
both
of
of us.
you. Okay.
firing a client.
Yeah. Well,
And if I may, I wanted to piggyback on something Carl said earlier too.
yeah.
The value of your Rolodex or your address book in your phone.
Mhm.
I do a lot of networking through various chambers and whatnot. And someone will say, well, Keith, what do you do? And my response would be, well, what do you need? Well, they roll their eyes, think I'm being a smart aleck, which I'm not above being from time to time. I tell them, I said, well, chances are that we can help you. And odds are that if we can't, I know someone who can. Now they're listening.
Mhm.
Once you've already established that you're not just being a smart ass, you actually are there to help them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because we can't be the solution to everybody, but like Carl said, I know someone who has the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I don't know those don't work, but I'll find out do.
Mhm. Mhm. That's so good. David, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I was just saying that's I've said that many, many times. I've told people that for 20 years that, I get to decide who I want to work with.
Mhm.
And there's some huge value and serenity in that.
Absolutely. And I think that I remember, just like Tasha was saying, early on, being an entrepreneur, right? Being an entrepreneur, there is this mindset that you have to shift from. It's challenging, of you have to take every single person. You have to take them, because if you don't take them, then how are you going to make the money? And yet, is that really true? I would say no, because there, just as well as that person's in front of you, there is another person to come. So let that one go, but get out of it what you need, right, Tasha? Get everything out of it that you need. What is it about them that grated you? What is it about them that frustrated you? What is it about them that made you feel insecure? What's going on in you that insecurity is so strong that you're afraid to tell them, I believe you would be better suited with someone else? What is it? You know, every single one of these things, you know, just like Keith said, it is a challenge. And yet the most beautiful word to use is it is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to gain. What is it about you that needs to change and shift to become who you are really? At the end of the day, who do you want to be, right? Like you said, David, you wanted the freedom to be able to dictate your schedule and who you work with. Well, isn't that why everyone becomes an entrepreneur who's an entrepreneur? Yeah. If we don't, then we might as well go work for somebody else.
And then you get forced into working with coworkers that you may or may not get along with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody has expressed some really thoughtful and good things. And in my office, I am the first person known to fire a client because all money is not good money. And every situation, and I see Dawn giggling because Dawn know I fired a couple of clients and I've left them with her, but gave them a different realtor. But all money isn't good money. So and you know, all situations just not, like you said, bottom line is, there is someone for everyone. You can use that personal, financial, business, whatever. Everybody's not for everyone. So, you know, someone else may be better suited for that particular situation than I. And that's my classic line. So I'll use that as a minute to fire somebody.
That's good, Tanya. I love it. I love it.
Well, I have found that the ones that I had to work the hardest to get are the worst I least wanted to keep.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. And you realize at the end of the day that the money.
Neither.
Yeah. That's so good. Isn't that interesting? The more you are in your field, you realize exactly what Tanya said. I couldn't have said it any better. Not all money is good money.
That's right.
My coach here that I use recently talked to me because I had some challenges, and just that work with people that appreciate you. Don't run after those people that aren't appreciating the hard work you're doing and the professionalism, but they're wanting something different, or they're just not going to be fun to serve. But plenty of other people along the way that are really appreciating you, and you know, move on to the next. Don't hang on to that or fret over it, because there's, just keep moving forward, because I can let that stuff debilitate me. And that's why I thought I'd join in on this session, because I've had a couple of hard things that were totally out of my control. And I was doing things that according to my broker and what I was supposed to be doing 100%, but they weren't appreciating that. And, you know, but it's like, I let all that like steal so much of my time, where I should just move on and start calling people that I know like to hear from me, and maybe get some help and serve them. And so, that's otherwise we get stuck.
That's a good point, Jim, because that's one thing I certainly have gotten really good at in the last 2 years, was just identifying who's going to appreciate the hard work I put in, because I put a lot of time in, more versus other realtors. I know I'm going to do a good job for my clients, because they all tell me I do, you know. So does this person have the potential to appreciate me, and are they going to be willing to refer me, you know, help me grow my business down the road? And if I see right, you know, from the beginning that that's not potentially going to be there, I walk away from it. I don't spend any time there.
Well, and it's not just walking away from it, but yeah, I mean, mentally walking away from it, because, you know, if you're like, oh, how could I have gotten this to work out? And I spend a lot of time spinning my wheels instead of saying, let's move on, you know, just let's move on to that next appreciative person that I'm going to really work hard for, like you said, a lot of effort into it. So
Jim, you sound a lot like myself, where on the backside. What'd you say, Dawn?
I said, You guys are
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
You're my people. You're
Yeah.
opposite of me. I love it.
You,
You're right.
I would love to invite you to do something for yourself. Give yourself permission to realize that you're not going to be able to please everybody all the time, and that's okay. And I'd like to invite you into doing an evaluation of yourself for that transaction. What did you do? What could you have done better? And when you're done with that list, if you're pleased with that list, pat yourself on the back, be okay with where you missed it, and go forward. Because if you're an internal thinker, which I can tell you are,
I am.
you need that. You need that self-conversation and that self-affirmation and that self-approval to go ahead. Because people can tell you all day long, right? Dawn can tell you all day long. I can sit here and tell you all day long, but in your head, there's something that is a disconnect. And until that disconnect is rectified, you're stuck.
Yes.
Okay. So please do that evaluation of yourself in that particular situation. And when you're done, I'd love to hear what you come up with, and then give yourself permission to move forward and enjoy the journey. And know that, and I've been wanting to say this for a little bit, know that everything that you're doing has a payday. Everything. Whatever it is you're doing, it has a payday. And by listening to what you're saying and listening to the passion that you have for every single client, that passion that you put into action, it has its payday. Even if you don't see it with that last client, it's going to show up in a client somewhere.
Yep, good stuff.
It's evident that all of us collectively care not only about what we do, but that we do it well, and understand that not everybody's going to appreciate our service, but we have to make sure that those that do are happy that they did.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And realize that you can't win them all. And as I stated earlier, some that you win, you wish you wouldn't have. It still is a loss. It occupies all your time with the least amount of return.
Yeah. Scott, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you have some input?
Who's that?
Only one, I have one phrase that I've heard said, and I like to say that I only do business with people that want to do business with me. It helps a lot. Thank you for
That's
noticing.
good. You're welcome. Thank you. I'm glad I asked. That was great.
I think with that, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll
Yep.
wrap up.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Nice job,
Thank you.
Courtney.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Courtney.
Good job.
Thank you.
Bye. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So much.
Appreciate you all.
Great content. Good.
Thanks.
Very well thought out.
Trails to you. Happy
I get serenaded too. I'll take it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all.